so we're going to start our discussion time. Yeah, so just one quick thing I wanted to remind people about. So after we're done here, the final product, final artifact of this workshop is going to be a report that we're going to be writing. So that is sort of what we are going to present to laboratory leadership and hopefully surface up to DOE. So that's sort of our responsibility as organizers to try and make sure that gets as much attention as possible. But all of you are welcome to help us write that. And so, yeah, if you write it, sort of the benefit to you is you get to be, you have your name on the report, you get to shape what's in the report, yeah, and then sort of up to us to try to get as much exposure as possible. So.
You're going to be collecting our slides to help you write that report?
Yes, yeah. So I'll send an email out for that stuff afterwards. Okay, so with that, Johannes.
Right. Fortunately, I filled out the form first. So, and I'm going to use that as an excuse for why I don't actually have slides, but the core dump version of some of my. Oops. Can I zoom in on this? Oh, no, that's not how you zoom in. I feel old.
You minimize the thing on the side.
I don't know how to minimize things.
The arrow over document tabs.
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
That doesn't do that.
Zoom, then it'll be centered.
Okay, well, whatever. So at some point, people just become old and they don't know how to use tools anymore, and then you feel embarrassed.
Yes, there you go.
So I'm actually leading with the first bold bullet there because it's not really been mentioned, but well, it's never been written on a slide anywhere, but it's been mentioned at least 3 times, and that really is monitoring. So as we are transitioning to, I think this is true for everything else I'm going to say, as we adopt those technologies, it'll get harder and harder to figure out when things go wrong. And especially if we're talking about critical infrastructure, time wasted at an instrument, I don't know, time wasted as a scientist that is an expert in science, parsing in their head log files, that sort of thing. The more we adopt these technologies, the more that will be a pain point and a place where we waste valuable resources. So we need to think about monitoring and also how to monitor cross-facility workflows. Isn't just not good enough to just monitor the LCLS end and then wonder why NERSC isn't working. And we're actually seeing that at NERSC. This is sort of a side comment. We're seeing that at NERSC when we have things like cloud services platforms. Someone will say, here I have this massive workflow. I don't want to put people on the spot, but someone sent me a flow chart of like about 15 boxes, and one of them was NERSC. It was the last box. They said, we are not getting our data product. It must be your fault. And then they said, prove it that your network isn't to blame. Turns out it wasn't our fault, just statistically speaking. But we need to start. I think that's something that has been underinvested for a long time because it isn't sexy, but it's becoming, I think, technical debt. And this sort of leads into this automation discussion that we had. I really liked the automation discussion. Again, we don't want people to manually shift around files. We want them to spend time thinking and doing science. But in that discussion, I want to again highlight, beware of false economies. For example, if you have time on the instrument that you are not actively collecting data on, that might still be valuable if the instrument is available, if that's part of your scientific workflow. So don't fall into the trap that compute likes to fall into, which is a GPU that's idle is useless. No, maybe it can actually be really useful to have a GPU available on demand. And that's also something that Tom mentioned several times in his talk, to have the on-demand queue, or at NERSC it's the real-time queue. That's really one of those things that IRI has pushed forward, and it doesn't sound cool because it's just policy, but it does enable cool science. Almost getting to the end. Workflows. We've talked a lot about workflows, so I'm really only doing like the diff from what I think is already out there in the wild, and that is a lot of workflow tools aren't streaming aware, and everyone here was talking about streaming. So we have to start thinking, not only start thinking, we have to start building workflow tools that work really well with streaming. Like we were talking to Dylan and Valerio, and they have some good ideas, and these things have to make it into production. And that might be a good hook to American Science Cloud. I'm sure there are some people discussing streaming there, but we need to really, push on the gas there. And the other thing that didn't come up in any of the talks here, but in the conversations, I think is important. As we integrate more AI into our workflows, we need to really be diligent about having data provenance so that we know the AI models that are helping make decisions for us in the pipeline. We need to know what data went into it, because there might have been poor data in there, or we don't want to oversample certain kinds of scenarios. So that, again, I think the AI conversation was very similar so there's similar AI conversations happening, but an interesting diff. I don't know, my Zoom broke, so I don't know what's going on. You're not missing anything over there. Oh yeah. So I think something like an aha moment that I had when watching talks involving AI is, and I think we're lacking this, at least in the computing side. When we're doing computing and AI, we think of AI as a big math model, but it's actually a statistics thing. So I think we need to teach our workforce more about good statistical techniques, so that, for example, we don't have to have a massive model to rule them all, but we can create an army of small models. Think of it this way: we don't want the Death Star, we want more TIE fighters. I think many people think the Empire would have won if they had more fighters and fewer Death Stars. And then the very final thing is, we need a healthy software and hardware ecosystem. It has to be easy, so easy enough, at least for non-experts to navigate. To me, easy means we have to have as few foot cannons as possible. Right, everything else we can learn and we can read in documentation, but something that will make people not want to work with us is, I followed the documentation, still didn't work. Why? Well, this undocumented thing is actually what you're supposed to do. I think there's great enthusiasm for open standards, but here's another American Science Cloud opportunity. Cross-facility and cross-system orchestration is lacking such standards. If we are already paying lots of national labs to come up with an infrastructure, they probably should also drive development of standards, and they should be open. But that's my core dump. Thank you.
Okay, Greg.
So my name is Greg Pintilli. I work with Professor Wachu, you might remember from yesterday. And actually my background is ECS. I did a PhD in ECS, but I got drawn into this sort of area of biology and applying computational methods to that. And so WAS started a cryo-EM lab here at SLAC about 10 years ago. I think before that it was mostly physics. Now it's kind of becoming, there's a bit of biology aspect to it. So one of the challenges I wanted to show that we've been dealing with is we have these 3D tomograms. And the first challenge is to annotate it. So you kind of look through for membranes and different things inside it. And this is a toxoplasma parasite. So this is a parasite that affects actually many people, but the immune system controls it pretty well. So there's various structures within this. So in this kind of a 3D volume, it's a bit, with tomograms, it's a bit more of a slice. So from the side, it looks flat, but it's actually like a full 3D volume. You can imagine, maybe, we don't really know. It could be more flat, or it could be sort of more circular, who knows? But that's kind of the limitation of tomography. And within this volume, you can't really see too much. You see kind of grainy structures like fibrils and things like that. But some of these structures repeat. So we can sort of extract multiple points along these repeating structures, and then do this subtomogram averaging. And you get something that has a slightly higher resolution, where you can actually start to see molecular complexes and things like proteins. In this case, these are made up of proteins. So one of our challenges is we get these, these 3D volumes, and then we kind of wonder, okay, what are these proteins inside them? These are not at the level of sort of atomic level where you could build an atomic model directly. But what we sort of thought to do is we take the entire genome, right? And the genome tells you the sequence of all the proteins in the genome. In this case, in this toxoplasma parasite, there's about 8,000 protein sequences. And there's all these AI tools now that can predict the structure from sequence somewhat accurately, if it's been seen before. And so we take all of these 3D structures, and we do a 6 degrees of freedom search here, so by position and orientation. And so this was like, this is something that I implemented, and this search can take maybe, let's say, if I distribute it across maybe 32 processors on one node, let's say, and in this case, it could take about 5 minutes, but still apply to about 8,000 proteins that would take maybe a couple of months to do the fulls with every single structure. So I parallelized a little bit further, to distribute it across many different nodes, and I used the SDF cluster for this. And I could do the search in maybe a couple of days. And then basically the idea is you figure out which of these protein sequences, fit where, and then you get like sort of the full molecular complex with the repeating units. So scoring is always like an issue. One of the challenges was finding a score that would tell you, okay, this is definitely the right component in the right place. So this is, for example, a plot of all the different scores. And then the ones that stand out the most, these are the ones that are likely to be correct. So that's something that, it's becoming more useful because more of these tomograms and subtomogram averaging is being used. So that's something that we hope, it's not published yet, but it was useful in this case. So we're looking for more cases where we can apply it. And then another sort of area that's a bit more new that what showed a little bit yesterday are these volume EMs. So in volume EM, instead of doing tomography with a small slice, you take a thicker sample and you mill away one layer at a time, and you get an image of sort of the top layer one by one. And you can build these sort of 3 volumes that are a lot thicker. So in this case, this is a volume of a human retina cell. And from your textbook diagram, it's supposed to look something like this, where it has this component that has a lot of these little membrane, sort of like, they look like discs, really. And this is the part where there's a lot of proteins within these membranes that detect different frequencies of light. So this is how the eye sees. So we can see that component of the cell there. And then if we go a little bit further down the volume, now we see the part that has a lot of mitochondria. So mitochondria feed all of these, create ATP molecules for energy, for everything to work. So that's the mitochondria part. And then we can sort of annotate this. And a lot of this was done by hand, actually. The sanitation was by hand. So that's kind of one of the challenges we're looking at. But it was just really fascinating to see like this. I'd never really imagined what a mitochondria looks like. And these are like 3D volumes of mitochondria. It's pretty amazing to see this. I think it's, so WA's always been at the front of microscopy. And this also kind of was one recent result that we're like, it's like, wow. And we're showing this to sort of different physicians and things like that. And, everybody's used to seeing these textbook diagrams of mitochondria, but here they are in full 3D sort of shape. So that's kind of an example of the things we've been looking at. On to the next slide. This is another movie of more cells. But just in terms of the challenges and what we've been working with is Data storage is a big thing. So the raw data is many, many terabytes. We're using the S3DF system for that. In terms of the 3D volumes we're working with, it can be from 4 gigabytes to 80 gigabytes. So it can be quite challenging to load it up on even a desktop. Actually, modern desktops don't have too much of a problem with it. And in terms of processing, we do like typical image processing, gradient removal. A lot of times there's a gradient across the micrographs, sharpening to enhance contrast. And automated annotation is still a huge challenge. So we're looking at different sort of AI methods like neural networks to pick these out automatically. It kind of, once you train it, it works well on one tomogram, but doesn't generalize too well across other tomograms. And this sort of search sort of algorithms that I described, where you're trying to take structures that you know already or volumes, and you try to search in a new huge sort of volume to see if these are repeating or see if they match up. And then finally is the visualization. So, we do this just on the desktops, really in laptops, but we use some software like Amira, Dragonfly, and Apari. These are all kind of scientific software that are geared towards visualizing this kind of data. For 3D, there's Chimera X, which we use a lot, is developed at UCSF. And now we're sort of looking at the web platform. Can we put this up in a way that can be accessible by just generally by the public, and maybe get this into sort of medical physician sort of environment where they can look at all these volumes, maybe used for diagnostics even. So for example, with the human eye, we're trying to figure out, are there different signatures for different diseases? So that's kind of what we're hoping to do. We're very open to collaborating. So across all of the computing, science, and medical sort of field. And actually, I learned a lot here. I wanted to kind of put down all of these tools and platforms. They shouldn't be new to me, but they were kind of new in a way. I still do kind of very basic Python programming. So when I did the 3D search that I mentioned, I did like a very basic type of parallelization where you just kind of spawn many processes, and you give each process a different part of the cube and maybe a set of positions to look in. But it was sort of very cool to see that there's these platforms that can make this a little bit more straightforward, hopefully, and maybe allow it to go across even more nodes. So that search, even instead of waiting 2 days, I'm hoping maybe some days I can get it to just be an hour or something like that to search through these 3D volumes. And so we're very open to hearing from people and staying in touch. So feel free to reach out to myself or Wa. And yeah, thanks. It's been really great being here.
I don't have slides. And I don't even know how coherent of a message I've got. Just sort of put together some thoughts. These are all coming from my perspective as somebody who has spent my career working on HPC programming languages and models. So I'm very much outside of my normal space here. And as far as what I learned, a lot of what I learned was a lot about what you all do at these big scientific facilities. And like I'm one of the people who benefited from having the term light source defined yesterday. Like I just don't interact much with your community. What was most, I think, pressing to me when I saw it over and over again was the amount of computation you require at the edge to process the data at the rate that's coming in and going to be coming in more and more. I mean, I think I was sort of loosely aware of that, but sort of seeing how intensive it is and how specialized your techniques are in terms of FPGAs and custom ASICs and things like that was really eye-opening to me. And also, I was impressed by the amount of expertise at the various sites to do these kinds of things, and how, at least from my perspective, it seems like each site and each workload potentially has different kinds of filtering they need to do, which makes it really hard as a computer scientist to think about, what can I do to help you? Because I feel like every single application or experiment potentially needs different techniques. I came in sort of very excited to be helpful once the human is kind of in the loop, so kind of in one of the outer loops, not the one right there at the collection site. And in particular, the name of the workshop, large scale scientific data analysis, really fit this Arcuda technology that I talked to you about yesterday. In some of the conversations in the evening, I realized it may not have been entirely clear. Like my team we're not the developers of Arcuda. I was representing it to you, but it was developed by the Department of Defense for cyber defense. And they basically have a similar issue where they have mountains of data they need to interact with. They don't know exactly what they're looking for. They want to interact with the data at scales that aren't supported on a laptop and by conventional technologies. And that led them to create Arcuda, which my team supports and helps contribute to. But again, it's sort of a community open source project at this point. So I came in very excited thinking like, this may be exactly what you need. You're generating tons of data. You probably interact with it. But I feel like, at least from my perspective, and I'm admittedly not always the best audience member, I didn't hear a lot of like killer challenges in that space once the human is in the loop. There's sort of workflow challenges and moving data around kind of challenges, but I didn't hear people saying like, we're really having trouble interacting with the data fast enough or, manipulating it. And maybe those just didn't come up. Maybe people don't want to expose their weak points. I'm not sure. But that's an area where I thought we'd come in with a strong story, and I kind of left going like, oh, I don't know, is there a role for Arcuda? Sort of similarly, the panel I was on yesterday, I think a lot of us are kind of alternatives to MPI plus X technologies. Definitely Lamellar, Legate, and Chapel. But again, sort of, I didn't come away with like, oh, here's some key things that alternatives to MPI plus X would really help with. That said, I think you all do things in that kind of space. So again, maybe we just didn't hear about it. And I think that's an area we'd like to collaborate if you're interested in it as well. We did hear a lot about streaming, and I think that's really important and was also made an impact on me. And I kind of feel like maybe Dragon, it was too bad it was in the panel with different programming models, because I think it may have gotten sort of lost there. But if you're interested in workflows and looking at workflows, I definitely encourage you to look more at the Dragon technology. So those are some of the things I learned, and I guess kind of observations. In terms of challenges, I sort of have two. One of them is that I worry very much in the HPC realm that we're a community that every time we develop a new piece of hardware, we also develop a new programming model to go with it. Right, so we've got like MPI for distributed memory, OpenMP for shared memory, CUDA, SYCL, whatever for GPUs. And so I think this is something I worry about all the time. But then coming here and hearing about the diversity of hardware and the landscape going forward, like I just worry we're just going to keep on adding more and more programming notations that all kind of have to fit together somehow. And I worry about a house of cards there. So for me, a key challenge would be like, how can we generate better unified programming models as our hardware continues to get more specialized, more heterogeneous. And then I think other challenge that comes to mind for me is just the social challenge. Like from somebody in my perspective, the challenge of getting to know your workflow well enough to help make a contribution to you. And on your perspective, I'm sure there are people who are like, these languages sound nice in the 3 to 8 minutes we heard about them, but gosh, learning them seems like a lot of work. I wanted to propose something that I think is really helpful. Like, it doesn't take me long when I'm exposed to a technology to go like, yeah, this is for me, this would be great. Or yeah, I can see this for somebody, but it's not for me. And I think having forums for like doing pair programming experience where you bring the scientific knowledge and we bring sort of the knowledge of our language or framework or whatever, sitting down together, sketching out some things, kind of learning from each other is a really beneficial thing and not something we really had time for here. So that kind of, pair programming, or you can think of it as speed dating potentially if there were sort of multiple science groups or technologies, I think is something that'd be really beneficial for our community. And I'm sure some of the other programming models would probably, be up for that kind of thing as well. You also asked about time-dependent things. I didn't really have any thoughts there. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Nick, is that me? All right.
Here, but while I'm doing that, I want to tell you a story. Well, actually, maybe this. Gotta be this.
It's not plugged in.
All right, here's my story. So we've had in my field a group called the high data rates for macromolecular crystallography. It sounds good, right? We've been meeting for about 10 years. We had a meeting this summer, and we had a one day in-person workshop, and I came away, I didn't really have any action. I don't think anyone took any action items away, which is kind of now this workshop, Elliot, I mean, just preparing the talk and then hearing the talks from the folks that I work with at LCLS, it just seems like there's so much to do. And I come away with it, you know, having a big list of things I want to try and sort of things that I need to get done in the next year. So, oh, and so, yeah, I know it's a lot of words. I literally took your homework assignment, just answer the questions, and I was half asleep at 7 a.m. Putting this together. So I thought, what did I learn? I learned this really great alignment of the goals within sort of listening to Yana, Valerio, Elise, Sandra at LCLS, even with the larger light source community, such as what we heard from Hannah, sort of single interface. Yeah, I would love to be able to just type a command and know where I can submit my jobs. And then just using streaming in a live experiment, which we haven't done yet. So what are the challenges and opportunities? So these are the ones that I felt kind of interface with other people's thoughts. Well, like I showed, we have like 3 different ways to take care of high level metadata, like what is the name of the protein you're looking at? And that's bad, right? You shouldn't have a database where the same information is recorded 3 times. Or is it good because 3 people are entering the data, so it's kind of a double check on each other? I don't know the answer, but I know that none of them is portable. In case we have to transfer it to a different resource, it's just not going to scale up. So I think this is a challenge. The generalization to GPU and multi-mode should be easier. I mean, I love some of the things I heard. Mike Bauer, all parallelism should be implicit. And Brad, with Arcuda, you don't have to worry about nodes and ranks. I mean, you know, coming off of the exascale computing project for 7 years, if you could boil it down to one word, it would be parallelism. So I can appreciate from sort of a deep point of view that I don't want to think about it anymore. So, and then I kind of hooked on to what Wachu said, that there's no funding body to help people process data. This is extremely lacking. I'm not sure exactly what you meant here today, but I mean, it seems to me it should include both the computing services and expert advice. I mean, even extending to, here's some users who are biologists, but they don't want to learn about processing data. So I should be able to step in and help them. And yeah, I mean, there's some resources. There's cloud computing where all of the software is installed, but I don't know if there's anyone who can actually step in and be a collaborator and process the data. So that seems like a challenge. And then, you know, I did come away preparing my talk, you know, thinking, you know, we're gonna take care of the large issues, but there are these small issues like the detector distance or the energy calibration. If we don't automate those, they will consume a large percentage of the time if they must still be done manually. So I really liked whoever said we can't have human beings touching anything. I don't remember who said it, but it kind of rings true for me. So what are the time dependent factors? Yeah, I'm a little worried. Well, I'm worried about being left behind with the American Science Cloud. I don't know what we're doing with that. But both the ALS and the LCLS light sources will be down significant amounts of time in the next 3 years. So how are we going to test the data processing on live data? I don't know how we're going to do that. We'll figure it out. And then sort of on closer to home, David and myself, we have 1 year of LDRD funding to work on the ALS Gemini beamline. So it'll be good to work on a well-defined stepping stone, and it's kind of crystallized for me. We got to process the data at 100 Hertz with a processing latency of 1 second and use the results to automatically drive at least one motor control. And, you know, if I had to boil it down, that's what I'm going to be working on with David. So thanks for the meeting.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Sure.
So I was a terrible student. I always ignored instructions. So, slash. There we go. So what I would say is what I learned is that don't step on this. That's the first thing I learned. Maybe it'll come back. Was that there's much more alignment that we all have. There we go. There's more alignment that we have than misalignment. And so I think we all are concerned with very similar things. And now it is very appropriate. The other thing that I was a little bit learning is the confusion about the American Science Cloud. It's quite frustrating. We should not be confused. This room is who's going to solve this problem roughly. So we should all go home and figure out how we're going to actually solve this problem for the American Science Cloud because it needs some help right now and we don't have much time. And so that's where, I just want to reiterate, we have tools. We have the tools that are spread across multiple labs, and it involves a lot of effort in the private sector as well. And we have a mandate to work together. And I think what I love the most about this meeting is that it got us speaking, right? And more importantly, it had us eating dinner together. It had us going for a nice long walk together, right? And so we actually have a lot of alignment and a lot of partnership that is capable here. And so leveraging what we have is the only way we're going to get at a science cloud that's going to address the urgency that we have been given with it. And so, I just want to reiterate that the lighthouse, the light source problems are data fire hose problems. Traditionally, the energy sector didn't see itself as a data fire hose problem, I don't think. But I believe that when we talk about these real-time control systems, they will be. And so leveraging some of the experience that we have within our light sources and moving it over to this other domain is probably the kind of lighthouse project that actually DOE wants to address. And so that's roughly what I say is we have a national challenge. We've been taxed to come do it. And I will again reiterate, I 100% support this streaming. Let's not forget about it, right? So that's it.
Yana?
Thing am I not supposed to step on? Whatever it is.
Next to the big,
Next
the
to
one that doesn't fit in the plastic.
Oh, okay. Nice. Next to that. This one. Oh my God. Hold on a second. Let's hit the button. Bad things happen. Is that?
Makes a second you stepped up.
I did not step on it. I actually didn't. I swear.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Does this need to be plugged in?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
See, always check the power and ground. There you go. Oh. Oh, I thought I was a genius.
Are you a shadow puppet?
There you go.
Okay. Longer to do this than go through it. Yeah, so these are my very poorly organized thoughts. So basically, the takeaway from this is that we are all talking about things you can help with. Pick a thing, anything, any one thing on the list will already help and have an impact. So regardless of what I say, there are lots of ways in which this community can help people at the scientific user facilities get more software usability, performance, portability, and programmability. So don't shy away from that challenge. So because I have a large constituency, I have, there's 10,000 users that have been part of LCLS at some point, and hundreds of experiments with thousands of users per year. So, my goal is to figure out how to help those users help themselves as much as possible. And then also remember that change is hard. So anytime you have software or hardware or a pipeline running anywhere, and remind you that my pipeline spans all from that edge, but all the way out to HPC. And I need the whole thing to work or nothing works, right? And so in that sense, anything you change in that pipeline is going to ripple down the effect. And the scientists who are sitting there trying to solve a science problem aren't going to want to figure out, why it is that their code isn't working in the middle of the night. So nor are they going to want to port their code every time they come in to have a new experiment. So change is hard. So here's the list of things that make things hard. So data, didn't mention it, didn't talk about it a lot, but it is a huge problem. We're talking about 100 petabyte level data sets at this point from LCLS. So data curation, data management is important, and it's important at the event level, at the run level, at the experiment level, and at the sort of high science level, or the DOE level, if you want to look at it that way. And it's important to tag the information for machine learning, so that a machine can learn from it, but also so that human beings can find that data and interact with it and find the right things to train the model appropriately. Remember, data is not one thing. Pipelines convert raw data to many intermediate data products before they finally arrive at some final data product. And we need to capture that whole chain. And we need to capture the data provenance and metadata associated with each of the important things in that chain. So when we talk about data, we have a tendency to just talk about it like it's one thing, and it's important to realize that it's complex. So complexity is growing, and heterogeneity of the systems is growing, and that leads to growing maintenance costs and a more difficult learning curve. So anywhere you can help profilers for these pipelines that span geography and different architectures useful. Every major research challenge right now is calling on the DOE to be more than just the sum of its parts. And that works in microcosm as well. So anything we can do to simplify these interfaces for users, and standards will help. Low code, no code solutions to things will help. AI assistance that would then lead to low code, no code solutions would help. Pick a thing. The other thing I've observed is, like, especially with these AI updates, as we start trying to figure out how to use large language models and AI to optimize our operations, and this is just really high level business operations even, the AI updates happen faster than we can keep up. So even if we come up with a tool that helps us, it doesn't work for more than 2 or 3 months at a time. The APIs change and then everything is broken. So how much effort do I want to invest in keeping one tool up and running versus developing the next tool? Like it starts to become a calculation, because it is zero sum. I only have so many people. So if we start incorporating new tools and fancy new things into our systems, how do we maintain all that? And then the tools that allow optimization usability are vital. Right now, we're at the beginning stages of some of these things. And so we're basically throwing HPC at a problem that might only require a handful of a modest, not a supercomputer, but as I say, an okay computer. And we are not really investing in that optimization process to bring the tools into a more usable scope. So yeah, how do scientists who want to solve a science problem learn to do any of this well enough to solve their problem? The other thing that I think I learned, just needs of the AI and large language models seem to be driving the hardware market a lot. But scientists actually need a mix of things. They need a lot of precision computing. They also need things like AI assistance and things to do like a course decision in the middle of the night. And you have different requirements for those two cases. But to a user coming into a user facility, they may not be aware that sometimes they need this kind of an architecture, this kind of a machine, and sometimes they need something with less precision so how do we figure out how to tailor our workflows and get our users to use these things efficiently? So pick a thing, anything, it'll have an impact, promise. That's it.
Mike? Yeah.
All right, I don't have any slides, so some talking points. Stand here. Yeah, so I guess I always enjoy coming to these things because I like doing science, even though I work at video. And so I like talking to people who do science and hearing about all the cool things you guys are doing. And so just, thank you for that. And I really appreciate, you all sharing all the cool things you do. So the first thing, I was really encouraged to see yesterday is sort of the standardization of sharing of data across the different labs. Like, just having used supercomputers before, it's always been really tedious and painful to move between, different labs and stuff and seeing all the different protocols and things. And it's not sexy, but I think it really makes a huge difference to users. And so like, the IRI stuff is really, really important. And I'd actually like to see more of that kind of standardization across, across labs. I think it would make things like really easy just to migrate between different, settings, environments, and computers for different people. So more of that, I think would be really good. I also was encouraged to see people doing reduced precision work. I think, as much as we would like, 64-bit precision to be, the top priority for everybody, working at the hardware vendors, the trend is not going to go that way. And it's just going to get worse. And so, if you can do stuff with reduced precision, I think, that should definitely be encouraged. I think, there's certainly mathematical tools and stuff that can help you out with that. And, I think having ways of deploying those a little bit wider so you can analyze, what degree of precision you actually do need for your workflows is actually going to be really important. So I'd like to encourage folks to continue pursuing that kind of avenue of research. One thing I always notice, just when I look at the different, workflows that I see being developed, it always feels a little ad hoc to me. And I realize that people are just, sticking things together and making things work. And, that's what needs to be done to get the science done sometimes on deadlines and stuff like that. But maybe this is less for the scientists and more for the managers and stuff, but it would be good to see investment infrastructure that, that spans, projects and spans timeframes and things. And just to have a little bit more of a broader horizon on, how you invest in infrastructure, because it feels like there is lots of shared infrastructure that could be built for a lot of these different workflows. And maybe we're just, not investing that appropriately. And as a result, people are stuck, kind of ramming things together. And the last thing I'll say is just, heard lots of people talking about different programming languages and stuff and what they like and what they don't like. And I just, encourage folks to tease out programming model from programming language. I know that's a distinction that might seem subtle, but I think it's actually important. You can actually embed programming models in lots of different programming languages. Not every programming model can be embedded in every programming language, but you can, often get bindings in different programming languages for lots of different programming models. And so try to think more about programming models than programming languages, I guess, is my last sort of like very broad, way of like sort of cautionary thought there. So, yep. And those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I also do not have slides, but so that's. Yeah, so I was very, it was very interesting to see all the work about taking the human off the loop in the experimental design. I don't think I have anything to say about it, but seems interesting and a little maybe we'll see how that turns out, but seems seems like a very different way of doing things. Not much to say there. It was interesting to hear the need for encryption and on data in transit and at rest and sharing between different facilities, especially to avoid getting scooped. Again, not much to say there, but that wasn't definitely not on my radar. I think Brad really captured a lot of the same findings. Like, you have your own solution. You have especially Valerio's talk where there's the Piasana thing, which is MPI, and it's set up in this way, and then it needs to communicate with this other component, which has different needs in terms of data sizes and batching. And there's a system that's been set up. So it sounds like what you value more there is sort of a workflow than it is a unified programming model. So that's definitely not something that my group has really focused on, but it sounds like there are other solutions out there that would help make that a little more a little nicer to build. And then in the same vein, like streaming between workflows, also not something that we've really considered, but sounds like we've mostly been looking at streaming a computation like within a batch job. So trying to target applications where you can run the same computation in batches and the system helps you do that. But it's all within the same, within memory or using host offloading or certain such solutions so that you can run essentially, you can process more data than your memory would allow. Sounds like your case of streaming or workflows is something different, and it's more about putting a lot of components together. So yeah, so I guess my biggest question is maybe more as Mike said, you have your solutions, and you won't you're not gonna jump up to something new necessarily if it can't be proven to work, or if there's no indication that it will work for you, and it needs to somehow compose with everything that you already have, that you're not going to throw away just because some new programming model came along. So I don't really have a solution to that, nor is it a new finding, but yeah, it's good to be good to appreciate it once in a while, I guess. Yeah, so no, I guess that's it. No big no big findings from me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Colin?
All right. Yeah, that's fine enough. So I actually just, I guess, wanted to take the questions as kind of like a moment to reflect on some things. Yeah, some things I learned, and one kind of challenge that I felt like we talked about a lot, but and I don't have a solution for. So, but just wanted to highlight it, I think, as an important challenge. So I really enjoyed all the discussions, all the presentations. The ones that really I found really interesting were some of the ambitions around multi-site, multi-system workflows. I think those are very interesting, very hard problems to solve. How to kind of work on like the heterogeneous like set of systems that the DOE has. And yeah, I was a little kind of surprised, I guess, like there wasn't as much interest in like bursting interactively between the systems. It seemed like what was really important to many of the presentations here was this more monolithic kind of application that for processing these pipelines rather than this interactive nature. That just was like, I guess, a little bit surprising to me because I always think of data analysis as a really interactive thing. I think it's kind of like Brad mentioned. I was kind of, one of the other things I learned was, yeah, kind of along the lines of the workflows was how much interest there was in bringing HPC into the loop. So rather than HPC being a post-processing offline analysis tool part of the workflow, more interactive with the experiment itself. I really do think that one of the key challenges here that, again, I don't have an answer to this, but that I think does need to be addressed to really make that happen is how you can go from a facility direct into memory with a compute node and make that, bring that latency down. Like stopping off at the file system probably won't be a viable solution if you really want to be able to feed back from the HPC system to the experiment. So yeah, I think I would love to continue having conversations about that, how we make programming that's sustainable. That's something that our group, Dragon is really interested in. We're kind of looking for good use cases, things that we can go for with that. And so, yeah, I just wanted to bring it up as a challenge and bring it up as something I'd love to continue conversation with after this workshop. Thanks.
Also don't really have slides, just a few notes. First, I would like to thank everyone for the very interesting and informative workshop. I'm coming from the experimental control and user support side without any formal training or education in computer science. And so a lot of the topics mentioned here were at the technical level fairly unfamiliar to me. But in that sense, I've learned a lot of new words and topics that I know that are for me to explore and learn more about. And I think that highlights part of the challenge for all of us here, which is to be at the same time on the experimental front, working on the instrument and maybe deal with the perhaps mundane issues, day-to-day issues at those instruments, while at the same time keep up with the extraordinary development opportunities and technologies that data and the HPC space has for us, which many of which have been presented here at this workshop. And that's also something that we maybe did not really explicitly mention and go over during these 1.5 days, like what are the platforms that we have for educating our high-level users, which I am somewhat part of, and the availability of documentation for non-experts as well, sort of bridge that gap between those expert tools and the end users, which may not be expert at all. A talk in that direction that resonated closely with my experience was the talk by Michael Bauer on reprising Tomasulo's algorithm for distributed machines. I think that really encapsulates the core of the issue, which is how to seamlessly transfer the simple sets of tools that we use for data exploration to the HPC side of things. And perhaps this points to a broader adoption or maybe more works in the direction of CUDA or Occupy Numeric, which I think are very interesting avenues to address this issue. And to finish, I think, yeah, this whole encapsulates the challenge of bridging the gap between the local interactive and exploratory analysis to scalable data processing. And do we have the tools that can do both and transition seamlessly between one and another? That's it for me. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
So I had a couple of thoughts. I wanted to respond to Brad's point about whether we need sort of the exploratory data analysis. So maybe it didn't quite come through, but I feel like when you push on it, there is maybe not all of the time, but I think there's at least some of the time like an aspect of that. And so an example of that is we've been working with Occupy Numeric and Manolis to develop an analysis for, you've got images and sort of curve fitting on some of the pixels. And it turns out if you ask, what do you do right now? They're binning the image, which basically means you're downsampling, right? Your image is whatever, you downsample it first, and then you do your curve fit on the downsampled image. It turns out that's sort of totally unnecessary if you have the compute to do it on the full image. And so, but it doesn't necessarily occur to the scientist like, hey, like I have a GPU, I could do this on the full image, or they're cutting things like I think people have talked about regions of interest a couple of times. And so there may be a subset of the image that you're really interested in, but A, like, how do you even find that subset in the first place? And B, if the compute were sort of free, so to speak, like you could just do your thing on the whole thing and then find the part you care about. And so I think there are, like, when you push on it, I think there are aspects of things where you don't necessarily know exactly what you need. And it is helpful to offer the tools so that people can sort of, they're not necessarily just opening it up and sort of skimming around, but they're doing maybe an analysis and they can sort of do it on more than they need to, and then pick out like the parts that matter to them later. So I think that is definitely an aspect of some of the stuff that's going on here. One of the other things that occurred to me is some of the things, so the small data tools that got presented yesterday and the LCLS stream, from my perspective as a computer scientist, look a little bit like programming models, where we're essentially taking, like sort of the raw streams are too complicated for scientists to handle. And so we're trying to sort of bake these into tools that, give them what they need and yet are still sort of programmable enough, right? These aren't like totally fixed function things. I believe in the small data tools talk, there's a slide of the actual code that gets used, right? So this is something people go in, they program on a per experiment basis. And I would like to see more collaboration between, the people who develop programming models for a living, the Chapels, the Arcudas, the Kupai numerics, and these sorts of tools, because I think there's a potential for more collaboration there. And sort of making things that are like meeting scientists where they are, right? Because these things have sort of grown up in different contexts. I think like there's some commonality there. So anyway, so that's the end of our time today. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I've really appreciated hearing all your talks. And I'm glad that we were able to bring together such a diverse group. So it's sometimes a challenge when you have such a broad array of experience, getting everyone to communicate, and you have these talks that are extremely different back to back. But I appreciated everyone's willingness to sort of wade into this together. And I don't think the conversations need to stop here. So hopefully you've made some connections. And if there are any connections that you would like to make that you haven't made yet, you can always feel free to go through me and I can try to set those up. So if there are any things you think about, like in the next couple of days that you wish you had met, such and such a person, like we'll try to set that up for you. So one sort of